Hello everyone, today I am going to talk about Joe Metheny, an extremely psychopathic individual who killed people and made hamburgers out of their flesh to sell. Joe Metheny began this path for revenge, but it ended up resulting in a terrible outcome. Joe Metheny was born into a family of 6 in Maryland in 1955. His father was an alcoholic and a very harsh man, while his mother was an indifferent mother. Joe's father died in a car accident when Joe was 6 years old. With 4 children to take care of, his mother couldn't give enough time to each child, and so Joe spent a large part of his childhood living with foster families. He would move from one home to another, and his childhood was not easy for a child. In 1973, when Joe Metheny turned 18, he joined the army, and his life changed completely. He became accustomed to using illegal drugs while in the army, and this habit continued after his discharge, leading to a terrible life. Joe became a drug addict and couldn't easily integrate into society after his return from the army. He didn't go back home and turned into a homeless addict living on the streets. He eventually found work at a lumber factory where he worked as a truck driver, and his life began to settle down. He also found a partner to live with, and they soon had children. However, his addiction still continued. The turning point in Joe Metheny's life happened in 1994. One day, when he returned home from work, his family was nowhere to be found. His wife and children had left him. This deeply affected Joe, and 6 months later, he learned that his wife had run away with a drug dealer and had become a sex worker. Joe's son was also taken away from the family and given to social services. Joe couldn't get his child back because he had a criminal record. Now Joe was filled with anger and hatred. When he learned that his wife and her lover had been released from prison, he hit the road and searched for them everywhere, going under bridges where the homeless live. He killed 2 homeless men who he thought knew where his wife was, but believed he was hiding his wife from her. He waited there and killed a prostitute who had become his victim. Joe continued like this, killing 7 people in 5 hours, and dumped their bodies into the river. When he saw the fishermen seeing him, he killed the fishermen too. The police caught Joe Metheny 2 weeks after this incredibly bloody night, but they had no solid evidence against him. Although he spent 1.5 years in prison, he was released due to a lack of evidence. After his release, he immediately went back to his old job at the lumber factory. He still hadn't found his real target, his wife and the lover he had run off with. Joe's target was still this couple, especially his wife who was a prostitute. Joe started living in a caravan behind the company. He was calling the prostitutes here, chasing the possibility of his wife coming. Of course, he was thinking, what should I do to avoid getting caught if he commits another murder? He had found a very cruel method, such as cutting the corpses into pieces and burying some of them while eating some of them. One day he did this to 2 prostitutes and killed them. He buried some pieces first, then put the part that was food in the refrigerator. Joe Metheny was a giant man, and it was almost impossible for his victims to defend themselves or escape. After a while, he got a small stand where he was cooking. He started making hamburgers from pork and selling them. Then he thought of mixing the flesh of his victims into it. There was a lot of demand for this new mix and stocks were almost running out, so it needed new victims. Wanted to continue selling in such a horrifying situation, he had to kill a person. As usual, Joe had called the prostitute to his caravan, but this time, he made a mistake and turned his back to the person he was going to sacrifice, doing something else. Rita Kemper, the woman, saw this opportunity and opened the door, escaping through a 5-meter barbed wire fence. Joe had thought he caught her, but Rita had climbed the fence and managed to run away. Joe chased her, but luckily there was a truck on the road, and they took him to a gas station, where they called the police. When Joe was unsure of what to do, will everything be over now, he learned that the woman had called the police. First he collected the prostitute's clothes, took the keys to the trailer, and went out. Just then, a police car stopped, and a police officer who was about to get off pointed his gun at Joe and shouted, "Get down." Joe had nothing to do but obey the police officer without any objection. Even the police did not expect that this giant man would surrender so quickly. There was a man in front of them like a character from a horror movie. During the interrogation, Joe Metheny showed no remorse and confessed to everything one by one. In 1996, Joe Metheny, who was caught, showed no remorse during the interrogation. He confessed to everything one by one, even explaining why he committed the crimes and where he buried his victims. Then, with the help of the police, he went to the crime scenes and described each location where he had buried the bodies. Different body parts were found in various places, and the giant man in front of the police was like a monster. During the interrogations, Joe talked about how he was upset that he couldn't kill his wife and boyfriend and expressed hatred towards them. In 1998, he was sentenced to death, and and his words in court were chilling. He said, "The next time you're driving down the road and you happen to see an open meat market, go in and take a good whiff. That's me, baby." The best of Joe Metheny, chopped, ground, and fried up for the hungry customers. Then he laughed. In 2000, his death sentence was commuted to 2 life sentences. On August 5, 2017, he was found dead in his cell at the Western Correctional Institution in Cumberland, Maryland. The cause of death appeared to be natural, and there was no evidence to suggest otherwise. We have examined the story of Joe Metheny, a ruthless monster who sold and ate human flesh hamburgers. If you want more content like this, please like and comment, and if there is a serial killer you want me to tell, specify it in the comments will be reviewed.